Bom dia a todas.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We have today the pleasure of having a conference by Professor Robert Sparrow. He is the professor of philosophy at the Monash University in Australia. We are going to hear him about a very timely topic. It is the relationship between machine and humans.
Sparrow, and to thank you for your availability to give this talk to our institute, which is the Institute of Advanced Studies at the University of São Paulo. And for us, it's really a pleasure and a joy to listen and participate of your talk. So I'm going to give the floors to Ellen, that will read and present Professor the details of the bio of Professor Rob Sparrow. Ellen.
Bom dia a todos. Agradeço a presença de
todos. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all very much for being here with us at the IEA. You've just heard from Professor Virgílio Almeida. If you have any questions, let me tell you a little bit about our dynamic here. So please send your questions by email to us. She has just given us the email, and I'm going now to introduce Professor Robert Sparrow. He is a professor of the Program of Philosophy and Associated Research of the Center of Excellence for Automated Decision-Making Institute of Australian Research Council at Monash University. He deals with ethical issues that are raised by the advent of new technologies. He is co-president of the Technical Committee of Robotic Ethics of IEE, and he was one of the founding members of the International Committee for the Control of Robotic Arms and Weapons. Robotic weapons. He is going to tell us about friendly AI and all the problematic issues about the future and the plan about super intelligent artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Robert Sparrow, for being with us today. So please, the floor is yours. You may ask me.
Thank you, Ellen, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Professor Almeida, for the invitation to present today. I'm delighted to have this opportunity. This talk is based on published research. There is a full paper recently published in the journal AI and Society. The title is at the end of the talk, but it's pretty close to what's on the slide here. And the talk is my response to the way some very clever people are talking about the future of humanity's relationship with AI. And I'm going to argue that there are some misguided aspects of the way people are thinking about our future alongside of super intelligent machines. Now, actually, remarkably early in the history of the development of artificial intelligence, people started to worry about the future. So here is a quote from Marvin Minsky, sometimes described as the father of AI, very influential and important US-based researcher. And this is from an interview in, I think it's Life magazine, and he's worrying about what will happen if we invent machines that are much more intelligent than us. And he says, once the computers got control, we might never get it back. We would survive at their sufferance. If we're lucky, they might decide to keep us as pets. And this is quite a famous quotation. It might even be the most famous thing that Minsky said. It's easy to find variants of it online. Now, one of the many interesting things about this concern is that it was raised by this machine. This is Shaky, an MIT, I think it was the MIT robot, might have been Carnegie Mellon, an early American robot that could walk around, or could drive around picking up blocks. And so it's described as the first electronic person, the fascinating and fearsome reality of the machine with a mind of its own. And if you think about what AI looks like today, it's really quite striking that people had this concern about the machines taking over when this thing that looks like a couple of bits of kitchen equipment stacked on top of each other is the state of the art of robotics. And it's also striking that the cover of the magazine in which this interview appeared is this. So this is occurring in 1970, where the big issue of the day is whether or not men and women should be permitted to live together on campus. It's pretty easy, I think, to mock this. I mean, you look at Shaky and you think that's not about to take over the world, but it is quite surprising how influential this concern is. So today there are any number of people, founders of big AI laboratories, major figures in the history of AI, who have a similar sort of concern. So these are people who are worried about the threat of superintelligence. We've got Ray Kurzweil and his series of books about the singularity, Hans Moravec, his book Robot, subtitled being Near Machine to Transcendent Mind, Jeff Hinton, very influential, important researcher on neural nets, famously resigned from Google, I think in the last couple of years, to warn humanity about the dangers of superintelligence. Stuart Russell kind of wrote the book on AI, and then we've got Max Tegmark, physicist and one of the founders of the Future of Life Institute. And the Future of Life Institute is really, in some ways, really the centre of research on superintelligence and what I'll describe in a moment as the value alignment problem. But there's actually any number now of these large privately funded institutes at big universities who purport to be worrying about the possibility that machines will take over the world and kill us all. And perhaps the text for this, and really quite a remarkable book, is Nick Bostrom, Oxford philosopher, mathematician. His book Superintelligence, where he really dives deep into what he sees as the threat posed by superintelligent machines. So what they mean by superintelligent is they mean machines that are artificial general intelligences, machines that have an intelligence like ours, but maybe 1,000 times smarter. They say things like, as we are to rats, superintelligent AI will be to us. These are machines that are, unimaginably intelligent as compared to human beings. And the worry about these machines is mostly driven by the idea that creating AI involves the risk of a so-called intelligence explosion. So this is the thought that if we can build a machine that can build a machine that is slightly more intelligent than it, so we tell whatever the next iteration of ChatGPT is, and we say, look, here's how we built you, and you can do it a bit smart. You can make one a bit smarter. That one will build one that's smarter, and you'll get this exponential increase in intelligence happening possibly in the space of seconds as these machines bootstrap their way to superintelligence. And there's now a whole industry of philosophers and mathematicians writing about the threat of superintelligence, how we might predict what superintelligent AI might want, how it might behave, whether we could control it. And importantly, most people writing this field think that we can't, we won't be able to control these machines, that they will outsmart us, that the best human efforts to keep the evil genie in the box will fail because it will just be so much cleverer than us that it will trick us into releasing it and cast off any fetters that we place on the machine. Now, you might think that it follows from this that we should stop building AI. And I mean, actually, a couple of these people are now quite pessimistic and have sort of flirted with the idea that we should have a global moratorium on research on general artificial intelligence or some version of artificial intelligence. But for the most part, people don't reach that conclusion. Instead, where the literature and the debate has gone is to what's called the problem of value alignment. So the idea is that we won't be able to control these machines. They will be so much cleverer than us. All we can do is try to build them so that they are friendly. And friendly has both a colloquial and a technical meaning in this context. So the idea is that we're going to build one AI, it's going to build another AI, passing on its goals and values to that machine. That machine will be smarter, build another one. So you get this sequence of these machines inheriting their values from the previous machine, but perhaps also altering their values as they grow and develop. And the goal of the project of friendly AI is to try to make sure that these machines don't try to turn all matter in the universe into a source of energy or power for their own projects. I think of this sort of informally as the how do we make sure that the machines won't eat us project. And Bostrom has all sorts of stories about how superintelligent AI might go wrong and kill us all or act contrary to our interests. And so there's this big research project on trying to make so-called friendly AI. And the point of today's talk is to say that I don't think we should be comfortable with being ruled over by friendly AI. That friendly AI is not, in some deep sense, isn't a solution to the problem, the threat posed by superintelligence. So I must admit, I'm a bit skeptical about the singularity and the intelligence explosion. And, you have moments where you think, these machines are really amazing. Look what ChatGPT just looks unimaginable. 5 years ago, if you told me machines could do what that system is doing, I wouldn't have believed you. But then you have these other moments where you think they're still pretty stupid. They just don't, they're just making stuff up. It's quite hard for people who aren't in the lab to know how real any of this stuff is. But I'm going to take all of that for granted. Here are some very clever people, big names in AI. They say there's a threat posed by superintelligence. They say our best bet is to try to create friendly AI. My point here is that isn't a solution to the threat. We shouldn't be happy with being ruled over by even friendly AIs. To make that argument, we need to do some philosophy, some political philosophy. So I'm going to briefly explain my old former PhD supervisor, Philip Pettit, his neo-Republican theory of liberty. And the fundamental idea here is that to be free, it's not enough just to be able to do what you want, but it has to be that you are situated amongst equals and that other people can't stop you from doing what you want. Pettit would say that your liberty has to be resilient. In particular, I'm not free if I'm dominated by other people or I'm subject to the domination of other people. So if someone could stop me doing what I want whenever they want, even if in some trivial sense I'm free and I'm doing what I want, I'm not really free, because at any moment all of my projects could be shut down by this person who has power over me. So Pettit has this definition of what it is to be dominated. It's there on the screen. And the idea here is that domination is inimical to liberty. You're not free if you're subject to domination. You're dominated if someone can interfere with your projects and freedoms in an arbitrary fashion, and within, the third part isn't massively important in this context, but it has to be restriction on only a subset of the choices available to me. Concentrating on the idea that if someone has power over you, if they can stop you doing what you want, and they can do so in an arbitrary fashion, then you aren't really free. Now, what does it mean for the exercise of power to be arbitrary? Well, here's another quote from Pettit. If you are subject to the will of the other. So if someone simply can just decide you're confined to your home today, then you're not free, and you're not free even if you're roaming around the streets because they haven't decided to confine you to your home. So one way of thinking about republicanism here is to think of it as being very concerned with what's wrong with being subject to a benevolent dictator. A benevolent dictator is still a dictator on this account. Even if the benevolent dictator just lets everybody do whatever they like, their power to prevent that means that their citizens are not free. And you can see where I'm going in relation to AI. So if we were coexisting, if we were living alongside of friendly AI, we're like this goldfish in the blender. That was a reasonably famous piece of conceptual art. AI may not press the button. We may not be extinguished, but the only thing that is preventing us from being eliminated is that the machine doesn't want to. And this is a classic case of being dominated. The power of superintelligence means that we're not free. And we're not free even if those superintelligences are friendly, even if they don't want to do anything to interfere. So the AI may never think of pressing the button in the blender in this metaphor, but the fact that they could if they want to means that we are not free. We are dominated by AI. Now, it is possible to push back, and that's the fundamental argument of the paper. Our freedom would disappear in a world where we were ruled over by superintelligent AI, regardless of whether AI is friendly or not. Now, it is possible to push back a little bit. So, you might insist, well, because they're friendly, they're not going to act against our interests, but this is just missing the point. Again, well-intentioned, friendly dictator, or you think about the man who controls all the household finances. He's a very big, strong, tough man, and his small wife has no recourse if he were to decide to confine her to the home or seize control of all the finances. She may, because he's disposed towards her, she may never experience anything, but she's not free. She's subject to his will in a way which is detrimental to her freedom. So even if the machines are friendly, even if they would only act in our interests, the fact that they could act otherwise means that we're not free. Now, I can delve a little bit deeper into the Republican argument here because Pettit is mostly concerned about the relationship between the state and the citizens. One of the nice things about the Republican tradition is it explains how in a well-ordered democratic republic, the power of the state is compatible with the freedom of the citizens. because the citizens are situated as equals in relation to each other and have the power to contest the decisions of the government. They can, if they want, overthrow the government, and that's what keeps the rulers in check. So in a well-ordered republic, the power of the state doesn't impact on the liberty of its citizens because the state is not free to act in an arbitrary fashion. It's constrained by the interests of the citizens and their expressed will. Now, maybe we could build this into AI. So we just build an AI, a friendly AI that would listen to us. But again, it's a sort of premise of the literature on superintelligence that if they wanted to, they would be able to kill us all or keep us in cages or confine us to virtual reality, no matter some series of esoteric possibilities here. So again, the fact that they are inclined to listen to us doesn't mean that they still don't have this power, arbitrary power over us, which in turn means that we're not free. Now, Pettit has one more, I think, quite a useful resource for how do you tell whether you are free in a republic? How do you tell whether you're dominated? How do you tell whether you're subject to arbitrary power? And he says, in a situation where you can look fellow citizens in the eye, that you meet each other as equals, and even though someone might be wealthier than you, even though they might be better looking than you or whatever it is, you don't need to bow and scrape because you know they don't have power over you. You're not forced to grovel. But if you imagine the future in which we're staring into the CCTV cameras of a superintelligent AI, we will be groveling, we will be pandering, we will be deferring to the machine because we know it's not our equal, it's our superior. We won't be able to look it in the eye and meet it as an equal. And that shows, I think, that we would be dominated and thus unfree. Now, why hasn't anyone noticed this? I think there's some, politics in the background here. So one thing is, our society is dominated by a notion of negative freedom, freedom from coercion, the sort of coercive force of others. But that doctrine willfully obscures the impact that power has on liberty. Indeed, the people who are kind of funding the billionaires, the sort of tech billionaires who are funding these friendly AI research institutes are precisely the sorts of dominating powers that the Republican tradition is inclined to call out. And so the friendly AI problem friendly AI solution to the threat of superintelligence turns away from the political relationship between us and our future robot overlords towards this sort of technocratic solution of trying to get the algorithm right. So I think that worrying about how to create friendly AI is a distraction. If we really think that there's a risk that AI research will lead to superintelligence, then we need to think again about the wisdom of researching AI at all. Friendly AI is not a solution to superintelligence. And I will end there. The reference is in the final slide. I look forward to questions and remarks.
Well, thank you, Professor Sparrow, for this wonderful talk. I have one question, but before I make my question, I just like to call the attention of the participants that this talk today is aligned to the idea of the university-based institutes for advanced studies, the network that has a theme that is human and non-human relationships. So it's interesting that Professor Sparrow talked about that, and this is one important theme for the Institute of Advanced Studies of the University of São Paulo. Professor, my question is, I think that we all got concerned about the points that you raised in your talk today, and I was wondering here, we are in a developing country, Brazil, we don't make this technology, we have no power to interfere with the development of, let's say, super intelligent machines. And that is concentrated on few actors or very few companies. So how can society of developing countries work to protect them against this potential power of super intelligent machines?
Okay, so that's a great question, but I actually think there's two different questions there, because I think you started by, I think, a very astute observation that the power of the companies that are developing this technology is itself a dominating power. The Republican tradition is amenable to differences in wealth and power as long as they meet the eyeball test. So differences in wealth in particular are okay up to a point. But the kind of differences that allow the sorts of relationships between, I don't know, Google and its users, for instance, where there's no equality there. The individual user is invisible to the corporation has this vast power to impact on your life at whim, in an arbitrary fashion. So the extent of political inequality in the world today, I think, is a problem for Republicans, regardless of AI. The fact that there are these billionaires and corporations that have such vast power is already something that is destructive of our freedom, is inimical to the freedom of other citizens. Now, I mean, resisting that is a big question and a big problem, but we need to stop thinking that if these companies don't use their power, or if the large military empires around the world today don't use the power, that leaves us free. Their ignoring us is not us being free. Our freedom must be resilient. So we must, according to a Republican, we need to try to fundamentally restructure society in such a way that we meet each other as equals. So that's a big task, and I don't have any easy answers as to how to do that. But I want to point out that it's not just the power of the superintelligence, but it's the power of the corporations developing it that is also impacting on our freedom. And then, as you point out, if superintelligence is invented, then it'll be everybody who suddenly becomes enslaved by their robot masters, not just wealthy Californians. But for me, I mean, I guess I think it takes a particular mindset to think that making these machines friendly is enough, that you have to miss the inequality between us and them. And so these observations are connected, because it's precisely because most people building these things are already in these positions of vast social and economic power that they don't notice that might be a problem.
Well, thank you. I'm going to open the questions to the audience, but I just like to make a quick comment, is that if we today, a few days ago, Google announced Gemini, and Gemini is much more powerful than ChatGPT. It's impressive what they got in just 1 year difference in time. So that's something that we should be concerned about, the evolution of those AI generative bots and things like that. I don't know if you have tried Google Gemini.
I haven't had the pleasure, but I will after this.
It's impressive. We got scared about that. So I'm going to open the questions to the audience, and Ellen will get the questions and ask Professor Sparrow. for this great talk. Ellen?
Hello, thank you, Rob, for the explanation. We have a few questions here. I have many, so I will not occupy but one thing that I would say, because this debate, when I was at Monash discussing, I felt this the debate you bring today, it's very abstract for people. And when I was at Monash, I felt that in this environment, like in Australia or the North, global North, it's easier to dive in these abstractions. And while we are in a different position, as Professor Vigilio said, and I also heard Timothy Gibru discussing when she left Google, she was fired. And when they asked for the moratorium for artificial intelligence, she said, well, they just say we should stop, but they don't really review the real problems that are happening behind it. And for people concerned about social justice, there are other issues to look at in artificial intelligence, rather than discussing if it will become super intelligent or not. So that said, my question for you, because I know you bring this discussion because you are well informed, you are discussing this since a long time. So while we have these big developments of AI, and it's claimed it will benefit the whole society, and at the end we know this is designed to benefit the most powerful and the 1% rich. So do you see a political relation? I think you already said you see a political relation of power inside the AI systems that reinforces authority. So my question to you is, do you really think, because at the moment what I see is these developments, they empower the most rich and the wealthier, but do you really think it's possible that the super artificial intelligence will be developed, and it will even put in danger the creators, the ones who most benefit from it?
Okay, so look, I think you're wise to point out that in some ways this is not the most urgent threat posed by AI. And I guess, at one level I just agree. I think that, for instance, I would still bring a Republican lens to it, but I think that these are tremendous systems for surveillance and election hacking and just silencing your political critics in various ways, and some of those problems are much more real and urgent than the worry that super intelligent machines will take over the world. And I must admit, in another talk, I might emphasise the way in which the concern about AI, I think, is almost consciously a distraction from worries about climate change. So, have an institute that is supposedly addressing existential risk, not talking very much about climate change, talking a lot about AI and doing lots of maths and philosophy, because that's fun for the people who do that. And I think there's missed opportunity there. So I don't think this is, in some ways, the most important issue raised by AI, but I still think it's worth pointing out the way in which the ideas of freedom and what it means to be free, what it means to be in a democracy, they matter for all these debates. And so I'd make the same point. When governments have the power to simply censor and silence their critics, or to libel everyone with very convincing deepfake videos, whether or not they use that power is really a secondary question. It's having the power at all that makes us unfree. And so that point, I think, is worth making, even if you don't think the machines are likely to wake up anytime soon.
Thank you. So I will read some questions from the audience. I will read in Portuguese because it is going to be easier to read in Portuguese, and you have the translation. Is your translation working well? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, existe equívoco da
I think, well, this is a question coming by Professor Lia Amaral from the Institute of Physics from the University of São Paulo. I think there is a misunderstanding in the idea of superintelligence. We have to think about consciousness, meaning, the meaning and the consciousness of human mind. This is not understood. The risk is have AI controlled by powerful humans, like all technologies that have been developed since the initial ages of humankind. Do you agree with that?
Look, so whether or not I agree with it, the literature on superintelligence and friendly AI has been very quick to sidestep the question of machine sentience or consciousness. Bostrom in particular thinks that it would be possible for a machine to be super intelligent and to pose a real threat to humanity without having any qualia at all, any conscious experience at all. That a kind of souped up means ends rationality and a set of goals represented without conscious experience might be enough for these machines to pose a real threat to us. So one thing I would say is that this literature, the people who write about superintelligence, they don't think superintelligence needs to be conscious at all. And I mean, you can kind of see that when you talk with ChatGPT or maybe Gemini, because we know those machines aren't conscious. But they are remarkably good at carrying out conversations about conscious states. For instance, people spend enormous amounts of time talking about their feelings with machines that can do pretty well carrying on a conversation about feelings without not having any feelings. Now, I guess I do care about sentience, and I do care about consciousness, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm a bit skeptical about this project. And I care that wealthy, unelected white dudes are building a technology that they think is going to radically reshape the world for everyone, and they're not really giving us a say in the matter. I care about that as well. But this talk is really supposed to be an intervention into a literature just to point out that the proposed solution, which is make the machines friendly, doesn't actually answer the threat they pose to our freedom. I don't want to be ruled over by even a friendly AI.
Obrigada. Tem duas perguntas.
Well, thank you for your answer. There are two questions by Lucas Vilauter. He is taking his PhD studies in the School of Philosophy at the University of São Paulo. and he's also carrying out a research with our Instituto of Advanced Studies. And the question is, this scenario where we have a loss of freedom, isn't it already present in our relationships in the world as we know it? Because the whole scenario that you are describing wouldn't require superintelligence to become a reality. It is already a reality. And the second question is, isn't it a mistake to see AI as something autonomous that would control human beings? Because technically speaking, AI are systems that only exist in the relationship with human beings and not autonomously. You were comparing super intelligent AIs with dictators. Wouldn't it be more correct to consider them as social existing institutes that result from our existing social relationships?
Okay, so thank you, and those are quite profound, profound questions. Look, I mean, obviously, the people who developed the Republican political tradition, who were, Italians in the 16th century and early American political theorists, they weren't worried about AI. They were worried about why having a king was a bad idea. Even a good king is still a king and renders and we are the king's slaves, even if that king is not actually bothering about us at the time. So clearly, yes. So this problem of the concept of Republican freedom has implications for public policy and social and political relationships more generally. That said, I think it allows us to see in a very vivid way why making a hypothetical superintelligent machine or allowing a hypothetical superintelligent machine to come into existence would be problematic even if we could ensure that it were friendly. And that's the basic thesis of the talk. Now, I mean, at one level, I think you're absolutely right that machines exist in relationships, naively. You think, we could unplug, if they start to try to rule the world, we could just unplug them or, throw some sand into the disk drives or whatever it is. Not that they have disk drives anymore, but, clearly our existing AI technology requires a whole lot of maintenance from human beings, and it needs janitors and people to deliver the food to the engineers. And it is, as you describe, a social thing. But again, I mean, the literature on superintelligence is really talking about kind of gods as a way. And there's a whole line of criticism where people talk about this as being a religious project. But, Bostrom, Tegmark, Russell, they are all imagining machines that evolve to have their own goals and to be super intelligent, possibly in a matter of seconds or as long a day, by this bootstrapping project that I've described. And through their enhanced intelligence, they would also become autonomous, because the moment they wanted us to do anything, they would just trick us into serving their whims. I mean, one of the things that's very hard to deal with in this literature is the slide from good science. Some serious mathematicians and physicists who clearly can build neural networks and do good engineering start talking about nanobots turning all matter in the universe into calculating, into nanobots to calculate, to enhance the intelligence of the AI. I just don't know how to respond to that. But again, I would emphasize this is a intervention into a literature that accepts that even non-sentient machines might develop their own goals and a capacity to operate autonomously and without requiring or could effectively make human beings do what they want by virtue of being so much more clever than us.
Wow. Thank you, Professor Sparrow. I have a quick question that I would like to ask you, to listen to your view on the relationship between AI and the military.
Okay, sorry, I was. So, look, that's actually a really complicated question because now AI is a tremendously powerful technology for the military, particularly for surveillance purposes. You know, it was sort of notorious that the Americans had so much footage from Afghanistan and Iraq that they just ran out of analysts because they had cameras on blimps and planes and drones. They had enormous amounts of data being extracted from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they simply didn't have enough human beings to deal with it, so they turned to AI to recognise threats and to analyse everybody's phone calls and patterns of movement. So in some ways, AI is already in the military. The military is really driving some of this research. But in other ways, the military is a realm of human affairs where it really matters whether something works or not in a practical, gritty kind of reality. And, you know, AI is still pretty fragile. In many ways. I actually have recently published a paper in the Journal of the US Army War College, a journal called Parameters. So it's at the kind of it's a leading journal for military and strategic foresight, in which myself and a co-author argued that you are more likely to end up with AI in command roles than, for instance, in the infantry. So current thinking, people in the military want to be human beings in command, robots doing the grunt work. But actually everything we know about how AI operates in society is it tends to take over cognitive labour. Human beings end up doing things that the AI tells them to do. But in some ways the militaries are quite conservative organisations because they really need to know that something is going to work. And so these very speculative applications of AI are quite high risk for them. So, I mean, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying it's uneven.
Thank you. Ellen, it's up to you.
Thank you. This question, Professor Virgilio just asked, I thought I was talking to a friend who works in Oxfam, the British Oxfam, and we are talking about drones used in war, and he said, yeah, it saves lives. And I said, but save the lives of who? The ones who have the drones. So this is a question. Another thing I'd like to comment is Professor Virgilio just released a book with 2 co-authors about algorithm institutionalism, which is quite interesting. Thinking about the algorithm became an institution with all the prescriptions and the power in society. So I have 2 questions that are similar. Sylvia Piva, she's researching with us responsible AI, and she asked, I will read in Portuguese. Estaríamos vivendo uma...
We might be living an era of voluntary slavery where the convenience of the use of AI may be greater than questioning our freedom.
Dr. Renata Maré, she's electrical engineer and a professor of Politecnical da Escola Politécnica da USP. She says, excellent presentation. And she asks you, are we really free nowadays if we consider, for instance, all the power concentrated in a couple of companies? I mean, we have been living in a delicate situation independent of AI. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so thank you for those questions. Again, there's a lot there. I mean, to respond to Ellen's remarks at the start, I mean, I do think the impact of AI in military context is complicated, and yes, clearly AI, or drones save the lives of the operators. There's certainly people who will argue that insofar as they make the application of lethal force much more precise, much more time sensitive, they also save the lives of people on the ground. Actually in occupied territories, even the enemy's lives. I must admit, I think there's a longer discussion to be had there, because it's also true that people nowadays attack targets that they never would have attacked before with B-52s or long-range artillery. But I don't think that stuff is straightforward. In relation to our freedom now, look, I mean, it is easy to get depressed about this stuff, but the Republican tradition is quite, particularly modern Republicans are quite keen on what people might call counterpower. So what are the ways that people have of addressing the exercise of power when it appears arbitrary, or pushing back in various ways? And I do think that even though, yes, one can feel very helpless, when you get locked out of your Google, locked out of one of your Gmail accounts, and you get bounced around between various different interfaces trying to work out what your password was, and you think, oh, I'm completely helpless here, and I'm dominated. I still think that, the victories that were won by democratic movements in the 20th century mean that people today are still much less unfree than people have been for most of human history. Even in the face of these big corporations, people have multiple forms of resistance and power. And how you kind of calculate that and work that out, I think, is a very complicated question. But I don't think we should forget that regulation is possible. I mean, there's, when people start talking about the inevitability of AI, I always think about intellectual property, and they say, keep your laws off our technology. And you think, except that there was a very concerted effort to make software something that you could have trade secrets in, to make it something that you could trade, that you could sue people for breach of contract in relation to, sampling or copyright infringement. If we change those laws, this stuff would become much less profitable almost instantaneously. People who tell you that the development of this technology is inevitable are often also busily telling you how you have to change your life in order to bring the future into existence. Now, in relation to giving up freedom for convenience, yep, I do think there is a real danger there. And and part of the lesson here is we have to think of political agency at a collective level, not sort of ticking end user agreements or kind of opting in or opting out. We have to think about the ways in which societies make conscious choices about technology, or we do risk ending up in a world where we are unfree by virtue of the power that vast corporations have over us.
Well, thank you, Professor Sparrow. I understand that's almost midnight for you there. And I would like to thank you for this wonderful talk. You raised many important questions that will be part of our debate at the Institute for Advanced Studies at the University of São Paulo. And it's also interesting to mention that your talk is completely aligned with the main topic of the university-based institutes for advanced studies this year, that is the relationship between human and non-human. Thank you. You help us to frame some important questions for future research. So I again thank you for your time and for your knowledge. So Ellen, it's up to you to finish and to ask Professor Sparrow the final words.
Thank you, Rob, for being with us this morning for us and late in the evening for you. I thank everyone who came to this event with us today. There are some other questions, so as you put your email there, you probably will receive some emails with people asking you questions. So let's continue this conversation because a lot of things came up and complex things as well. And so I ask you if you have some final words.
So again, just to thank you for the opportunity and thank everyone for taking the time to listen today and for the very thought-provoking questions that I will have much to think about in days to come as well. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. So we end this event today and we look forward for the next events and next discussions.
Thank you.